And then we were talking about dogs and how we socialize dogs and how they need to bite in order to learn what's called bite inhibition. So Jordan Peterson was talking about some new research which is quite interesting. So toddlers are antisocial. 2-year-olds, they don't know how to socialize. They can't, like a 2-year-old generally is not yet ready to engage in like interactive play with other children. They're starting to do parallel play. But they can't play very well with each other because they just start stealing each other's toys. They can't coordinate. They fight. But then some of them have particularly difficulties with that. So you have a distribution of personality. And basically, people who are going to be fairly agreeable as adults tend to learn how to get along earlier. So people who are going to be more disagreeable as adults, they tend to have a harder time with that. Probably also how much negative emotion you have has a big impact. People who are low in neuroticism are going to have an easier time dealing with the challenge of giving up their toys. People who are high in neuroticism are going to have a harder time. So you have a group of kids who are very antisocial, and almost all of them are boys. The most antisocial kids are almost all boys. And essentially, the research seems to indicate that if you don't have a kid who can play with other children by the time they're 4 years old, they've basically missed the window. Children primarily socialize themselves after 4 years old. They socialize through interaction with each other. That's how they learn to interact with the world. And if your 4-year-old if your 4-year-old acts like a 2-year-old, other 4-year-olds don't want to play with him. And then that cycle continues, and they fall further and further behind. So this research that he was talking about seems to indicate that the number one thing that helps little boys and antisocial kids become competent in socialization is roughhousing. They need to fight. They need to be pushed. They need to engage with their bodies. They need to know what it's like to feel pain and to notice that pain is on somebody else in order to actually develop the compassion and the altruism and the capacity to negotiate to become a competent person. So this is kind of my own story in an interesting way. Like I must have been socialized well enough at 4 to survive, but I wasn't surviving so well. When I was in elementary school, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, I was struggling. I had ADHD, I had dyslexia, and I was really angry, and I was in a bad place. And my mentor came into my life. My dad had played with me a lot. Like my dad would spin me around and throw me like that, but he was never very available to me. It was a rare treat when that would happen. But I had this mentor came into my life, and he basically just gave his energy to me, devoted himself to me, and he let me roughhouse with him as much as I wanted. And I was angry. I was so angry that I would black out, and I would call him the Shadow, and I would attack him like as hard as I could. And he would give me the opportunity to do that. He'd be there with me and just let me do that. And I did that like all summer. I just fought with him. I just attacked him as hard as I could, and he gave me space to do that. And then when I was happy, he'd spin me around and throw me in the air and catch me, and it was incredibly healing for me. And through that and through reading epic literature, I discovered that I had a real love of learning, and I started studying, and I was able to kind of progress socially and do all right. And all my life this has been a theme. I also started studying martial arts when I was very young. And when I was younger, I had this real desire to fight. I just liked fighting. Up until I was about 13 years old, like I was in a community where my friends and we just had fist fights. That was a thing that was pretty normal. And like we'd go around and like walk through Marble Mount looking for people to have a fist fight with. But it was through training martial arts and through roughhousing that I eventually kind of got control of my anger, and I always needed that. I always needed that physical expression. I always had to go and do that. So I kept training martial arts. I kept sparring. I kept doing this stuff my whole life. And then when I was 12 years old, people started asking me to babysit. And so I was working with all these little boys, and I just noticed, little boys and girls too, that they were craving this, that any time you gave them an opportunity to roughhouse like this, they just wanted so much of it. And so I've done that with generation after generation of kids. When I was 13 years old, my best friend died after a bicycle accident. And he had a little brother who was 6. And his little brother couldn't fall asleep without getting roughed up by his older brother, basically. And so his mom eventually called me like 3 months after he died and asked me to come over and be a surrogate big brother and just beat up her son so he could sleep. And I did that for years. And so I can really testify from my own life to how this is a powerful way to develop the capacity to socialize and empathize. So when we're working on this roughhousing stuff, it's martial arts, it's touching based on self-defense, but it's something much more. Like, I'm really trying to help people understand that there's this form of play that is one of the most profound forms of play that's being demonized by our culture. Because we're not giving little boys and little girls a chance to do this. We are taking them at 5 years old and telling them if they put their hands on somebody, they're going to get suspended from school. Right? Little boys are getting suspended for biting Pop-Tarts into the shape of guns.
I saw that.
Right? Recently, Mercer Island tried to ban tag.
No, I saw that.
It makes kids feel bad if they get tagged, so no tag.
What? There was no running at my elementary school playground.
No running?
No running.
So when my dad was young, they played Russian basketball, tackle basketball. And they learned front handsprings and back handsprings and backflips as part of regular PE. We've taken away so much movement from people, and it's making people weak and miserable. And it's really, actually, I think it's making it harder for people to negotiate and to deal with life. It's like, you've never been really physical with somebody. It's like you don't have confidence in your ability to really move and to recognize your energy with another human being. An interesting conversation that came up. Actually, I'll save that story. We'll talk about that story later. So, the rats, the dogs, roughhousing, the story of how we come from the same ancestors as lobsters and we've had to solve the dominance hierarchy problem.